Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. I'm recording this video on the 14th of April 2021. Only 5 days to go till the resumption of the Candidates Tournament. The 2020 FIDE Candidates Tournament, the second most important event in chess after the World Championship match itself, started in Yekaterinburg in Russia on March 17th, 2020. It was stopped by FIDE, the World Chess Federation, just before round 8 was set to start on March 26th, a day before all flights out of Russia were grounded. The pandemic thwarted all attempts to resume the 8-player tournament, until now. This candidate cycle is the 29th in the history of the undisputed World Championship. On Chess to Impress, we're counting down towards the resumption of the Candidates Tournament by looking at the first 28 candidate cycles in history. It all started in London in 1883, where Zukertort and Steinisch gained the right to play the first official World Championship match against each other, which happened in 1886. Wilhelm Steinisch, the first world champion, gained the right for a rematch against the second world champion Emanuel Lasker in St. Petersburg 1895-1896. Paul Keres from Estonia won the tournament in the Netherlands in 1938 and had the right to challenge world champion Alyechin for the world title, but he never got a match because of World War II interfering. David Bronstein won Budapest and Moscow 1950 to challenge world champion Botvinnik for the world title. Vasily Smyslov won 2 cycles and challenged Botvinnik, and Misha Tal was Botvinnik's next opponent. Tigran Petrosyan won the Candidates Tournament on Curaçao in 1962, and 1 year later he became world champion by beating Botvinnik. Boris Spassky also won 2 cycles, once he lost to Petrosyan and once he beat Petrosyan to become world champion. Bobby Fischer qualified for the match of the century against Spassky in the cycle that finished in 1971. Anatoly Karpov beat Viktor Korchnoi in Moscow 1974 to qualify against the World Championship match against Fischer. Fischer didn't play and Karpov became the 12th world champion by default. Viktor Korchnoi won the next 2 cycles and both times lost to Karpov in a World Championship match. Then the Kasparov era started. He won the next cycle in 1984 and became world champion 1 year later. Karpov came back, won the next 2 cycles. In total, Karpov and Kasparov played 5 World Championship matches against each other, and it was Nigel Short who broke the Karpov-Kasparov era by becoming Kasparov's next challenger in 1993. It was Anand's turn in 1995, and it should have been Alexis Sherov to play Kasparov after beating Kramnik in 1998 in Cazorla. But Sherov never got a match. Kramnik did, and he became the 14th world champion by beating Kasparov in the year 2000. Leko was Kramnik's first opponent, and in 2007 4 players qualified for the World Championship tournament: Aronian, Gelfand, Grishuk and Leko. That tournament was won by Anand, who became the 15th world champion. Anand then beat Kramnik. There were no games played for that cycle, so it's not on this list. And Topalov and Gelfand and Carlsen were Anand's next 3 opponents. The last one is in red because this video is about that cycle. In the next video we're going to look at Anand's comeback by winning Khanty-Mansiysk's 2014 for a rematch against Carlsen, and Karyakin and Caruana were Carlsen's last 2 challengers. So who will it be? Yekaterinburg 2020-2021. It's all going to start very soon and we all can't wait. As said, we're building up by looking at the 2013 Candidates Tournament, and that was a round-robin event. It was the first time since 1962 that a round-robin format had been used for a Candidates Tournament. It had been used for the 2005 FIDE and 2007 overall World Championships, but not for the Candidate Cycle. It took place in the Institution of Engineering and Technology in the Savoy Place in London in the UK, from March 15th to April 1st, 2013. And these were the 8 participants. This is from the Wikipedia page. The top 3 finishers of the Chess World Cup 2011 qualified. They were Svidler, Grishuk and Ivanchuk. 3 players qualified on rating: Carlsen, Aronian and Kramnik. The organizing committee's wildcard went to Timur Rajabov from Azerbaijan, and the loser of the last World Championship match, Anand against Gelfand, also qualified. And what an amazing event it was. Before the last round, only Carlsen and Kramnik could win the tournament. They were equal on 8.5 points out of 13 games, 1.5 points ahead of Svidler and Aronian. Carlsen had a better tiebreak. On the first tiebreak, the score from their individual games was 1-all, but Carlsen was ahead on the second tiebreak due to having more wins, and this would not change if they both scored the same in the final round. Therefore Kramnik, who had black against Ivanchuk, needed to outperform Carlsen, who had white against Svidler. Carlsen played to win, since that would guarantee him the tournament victory, regardless of Kramnik's result. Similarly, Kramnik knew that the odds of Carlsen losing with white were minute, and he went all in against Ivanchuk with the Pirch defense. This backfired and Ivanchuk obtained an early advantage, while Carlsen got a level position against Svidler. Carlsen later got into serious time trouble and did not defend adequately against Svidler's attack, which gave Svidler a winning endgame. Meanwhile, Ivanchuk had outplayed Kramnik, who resigned a few minutes after Carlsen lost. Thus the tournament was won by Carlsen on the second tiebreak, and Carlsen's win earned him the right to challenge the reigning world champion Anand for the world title. And here is the final table. As you can see, Carlsen and Kramnik both on 8.5, Svidler and Aronian only half a point behind. Carlsen became Anand's challenger because he had won 5 games in this event and Kramnik only 4. A cruel tiebreak, but all players knew this before the tournament started. In this video we're going to look at those final dramatic moves in the Carlsen, Svidler and Ivanchuk Kramnik games. Let's have a look. This is the position in Carlsen against Svidler. Carlsen white, Svidler black, and it is the position after 25 bishop a8 takes d5 from Svidler. White is slightly better. It's a very complicated position. You may ask, what is that knight doing on h6? How did it get there? In this position, Carlsen should have taken on d5, queen takes, and then the knight back to g4. This is slightly better for white, as both players agreed in the press conference after the game. White's minor pieces are better than black's. But Carlsen played knight g4 straight away, and now the position gets crazy. If you take that knight which is unprotected, then bishop takes d5. That is nice for white with a strong bishop pair. Svidler did not do that. After knight g4 he played bishop f3. Bishop f6 check, that was Carlsen's idea with knight g4. If you take that bishop, then there is queen h6 check, king h8, and knight takes f6, and white wins. There's a checkmate on h7. So after bishop f6 check, you cannot take that bishop. Svidler saw that and played the king back to g8. Knight a6 check, king f8, and queen e3. And as chess players say, everything is hanging. The bishop on f6 is hanging, the bishop on f3 is hanging, and the pawn on c5 is hanging as well. Bishop back to b7 from Svidler, bishop h4, both players are saving their bishop, and queen h3. On move 30, and that is threatening checkmate on g2. Carlsen had less than a minute here on the clock till move 40, so 10 more moves to make, and there was no increment in the first 40 moves. What he should have played here is bishop d5, and then if black takes that bishop, there is queen takes c5 check, winning the piece back, king g7, queen takes, and then black can take the knight, but there is queen takes f7 and the game goes on. White has good compensation for the piece. The bishop on c7 is hanging, so for example rook c8, then queen e7, and that is threatening checkmate with bishop g5, and then queen f5 has to be played, and the game goes on, but white has good compensation. So all this after queen h3 and then bishop d5. But Carlsen played the only other move that defends against a checkmate on g2, and that is f2, f3, and that move is not a good move. Carlsen just did not have the time to calculate it all in this very complex position. Knight f4, exclamation mark, great move from Svidler, renewing the checkmate threat on g2. If you play queen f2, then there is queen takes h4, g takes, knight h3 check, winning the queen back, king g2, and knight takes f2, king takes f2. Black is winning with the 2 bishops, and just look at white's pawns. They are all weak. As we call it, is the dentist dream, the white pawn structure. So after knight f4 you cannot play queen f2. Carlsen saw that and took on f4, took the knight. Sweetler took the bishop and knight takes f7, which is the only way, by the way, to save that knight which was hanging on h6. Bishop takes f3, threatening queen g4 and checkmate. On g2 you cannot take that bishop because your rook will fall off the board. So after bishop takes f3, Carlsen played queen f2 to defend against checkmate. Queen check anyway, and Carlsen interposed the queen. E takes f4, rook takes, king takes, queen takes, bishop takes, and knight g5. Black has an extra pawn and the bishop pair. We're on move 38, Carlsen had seconds left. h6 von Sweetler, knight f7, h5 and knight h6. Carlsen has made the time control, but his position is lost. Black, as said, has an extra pawn and two beautiful bishops. You don't want to part with the bishop on g4, so bishop d1 was played, and it turns out that this is an easy win for black. He just pushes his kingside pawns. Well, anyway, Sweetler made it look easy. Let's see what happened after the time control. King f2, f3, h3, bishop f4, knight f7, g5, king e1, attacking the bishop on d1, but let's look at this move from Sweetler. g5, g4, the pawns keep rolling, and he just gives up on that bishop on d1. You cannot really take it, because then there is g3, and those pawns will go through. Very nice move, g4. Carlsen saw it, he took on g4, h takes, and now he saw no other way out but to take the bishop. He knew he was lost. g3, king e1, g2, king f2, and the last move of the game, bishop h2. And Carlsen resigned as black will get a new queen on g1. A bitter pill for 22-year-old Magnus Carlsen, losing the last game with the white pieces. I'm quoting you from New in Chess magazine. Carlsen was obviously delighted that his mission had been accomplished after all. He did not even want to think about the situation he might have been in, and when he was asked what failure would have done to him, he gave the optimist's answer with a grin. I don't want to think about that. I was most of all focused on qualifying and winning the tournament, not on how to not qualify. But he was open about this atypical collapse. I guess to some extent the pressure got to me a bit. And I was also tired, which is not a good combination. In general, I made a lot of poor decisions, both practically and also pure chess decisions that I don't normally make. And the game Ivanchuk-Kramnik was still going on, and now it was clear that Kramnik only needed a draw to win the tournament and get a rematch against world champion Anand. And let's have a look how that game finished. This is the position after move 30, white Ivanchuk, black Kramnik. Ivanchuk has just played his bishop from d5 to c4. If we do a body count, we see that Kramnik has an extra pawn, black is a pawn up, but if we look a bit further, we see that Ivanchuk has wonderful compensation for the pawn. His pieces are more active than black's, and white will eventually win his pawn back. a6 and c6 are weak pawns in black's camp. In this position, knight e6 is a good move, and let me quote you from the magazine New in Chess, where Kramnik talks about this position. On move 30, when I could play knight e6, a move I would have made in any other situation, no doubt about it. And then I'm a little bit worse, but it's not very difficult to make a draw. But then I've no chance to win at all, and I wanted to keep the option to let Vasily go wrong if a win was needed. That was a brief moment. When it became clear that Magnus was in trouble, I was already in big trouble. So that's why Kramnik did not play knight e6 here to keep winning chances in the position. He played queen c8 instead. Queen b3, h5, bishop e3, knight e6 and rook h2 a1. And now this pawn is more or less gone. Attacked 3 times. White will get his pawn back. h4 from Kramnik. Ivanchuk took that pawn and queen d8 to take that pawn and then infiltrate with the queen. Rook takes a6, and here probably Kramnik should have taken on a6, rook takes, queen takes h4 and rook takes c6. White is better, but more importantly black has 0 winning chances, and at this moment it was still not clear that Carlsen would lose, so Kramnik had to try and keep winning chances somehow. Instead of rook takes a6, he played rook c8, keep the pieces on the board. And now Ivanchuk just returns to h1 after having won the pawn on a6 to make sure that pawn on h4 is covered and the black queen does not infiltrate in white's position. Nice move. Rook c7, bishop takes e6, rook takes, and b4, b5. Very nice move. You cannot really take that pawn. If you do that, there is rook takes, f takes, and queen takes check. White has an extra pawn and an attack on the king. It's a winning position for white. So after b5, you cannot really take on b5. Rook b7 was Kramnik's choice, and now Ivanchuk pushed the b pawn, and that is a great pawn now, supported by the bishop. And already on the 6th rank. c5, rook b1, bishop f8, queen d5, and queen b8. We're on move 41, the time control is reached, and here Ivanchuk took some time to calculate his position. He could have taken on c5, that wins, but he played rook b2 a1, very nice move. The idea is rook a8, rook d6 from Kramnik, and there comes rook a8, and that is checkmating the black queen. So black has to take white's queen. Kramnik did that. Rook takes, e takes, and here white is winning. That b pawn is very strong, and unfortunately for black you cannot really take it, because if you do, there is rook a8 with the threat of bishop h6 winning the bishop on f8. So for example king g7, and then there is rook takes f8 anyway, because if you take, there is a bishop fork. Very nice. And this will end up with an extra piece for white. King e8, bishop takes b6, and even you and I can win this position against Kramnik. So after e takes d5, you cannot take that very strong pawn on b6. Nice play from Ivanchuk. Bishop d6 was Kramnik's move. Rook a6, protecting the pawn. Now that pawn is hanging. Rook b7 and king f1, and here Kramnik resigned. Did he not resign too early? No, not really. The king is just going to march up the board, and white is going to win the c5 pawn, and then we'll have connected pass pawns. For example, here the game finished, but for example king f8, king e2, king e8, white brings the king up further and even further, and now there's nothing that black can do. Let's make a move, f6 for example, that pawn is just lost, bishop takes, king takes, and still there's nothing black can do. Let's push a pawn, rook a7, king c8, rook takes, king takes, and d6. And this again is a position that you and I can also win, against Stockfish even. So what a dramatic finish. Carlsen lost, Kramnik lost, and in the end Carlsen won the tournament. And later that year he beat Vishwanathan Anand to become the 16th official and undisputed world champion. I'm covering that match in my series on the World Championship matches. The link to the Anand-Carlsen match is up here. I hope you like this video and that you'll keep counting down towards the resumption of the Candidates Tournament with me. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.